What if the company you built, the one that carried your sweat, your sleepless nights, your singular, uncompromising vision, and your very identity, decided it no longer needed you? Imagine pouring your soul into creating something truly revolutionary, a force that promised to change the world, only to be told one day in a cold, sterile boardroom that you were the problem. What if everything you had painstakingly created, every late night spent refining an idea, every argument won in the name of perfection, was unceremoniously taken away from you, almost overnight? The keys to the kingdom you forged are handed to someone else. You are cast out, an exile from your own creation, left to watch from the sidelines as your legacy is dismantled, piece by agonizing piece. This is the ultimate betrayal, not just by a board of directors, but by the very entity that was once an extension of yourself, a living, breathing thing you brought into the world. This is not a hypothetical exercise in corporate drama. It is a question that haunted one of the most iconic figures of the modern era. And the story doesn't end with exile. In fact, that's where it truly begins. The narrative grows even more complex, more improbable. What if, years later, after wandering in a wilderness of your own making, after experiencing the bitter taste of public failure and the crushing weight of private doubt, you were called back? What if you were asked to return to the kingdom you lost? Now a crumbling empire on the brink of total collapse? The company that had once fired you, that had deemed you unfit to lead, was now dying. It was bleeding money, losing its soul, its direction, its very reason for being, and its last desperate hope was the very founder it had once forsaken. The final, most powerful question is this: what if you came back and actually saved it? What if you walked back into the ruins of your former creation, and through a series of incredibly difficult decisions, ruthless decisions, brilliant decisions, you not only stopped the bleeding, but resurrected it? You would not just be saving a company, you would be rewriting your own history, turning a story of humiliating defeat into one of epic redemption. This is the journey we are about to embark on. It is a story that transcends the sterile world of business metrics and quarterly reports, reaching into the core of what it means to lose everything and find the strength to rebuild it all, but better, stronger, wiser. This is not just a business story. It is not a simple tale of profits and losses, of market share and stock prices. This is a human story, etched with the scars of profound and the blinding light of an impossible. It is a chronicle of ego, the destructive force that can tear empires apart, and the quiet of redemption, the long, arduous path back to grace. Above all, it is a story about the immense, world-altering of a single, one choice made at a moment of absolute crisis that pulled a legendary company back from the abyss and forever changed the trajectory of technology, culture, and modern life itself. The narrative of Apple is often told as a seamless arc of innovation, a smooth and inevitable climb to global dominance. We see the sleek iPhones in our hands, the minimalist laptops on our desks, and we assume it was always destined to be this way. The brand is so powerful, so deeply embedded in the fabric of our lives, that it feels untouchable, eternal. But this perception of invincibility is a carefully constructed illusion, a polished surface that hides a much darker, more volatile history. A story of betrayal, exile, and near extinction. The truth is that Apple, the titan of industry, the most valuable company in the world, was once on its deathbed, gasping for air, just 90 days from complete and utter bankruptcy. Its survival was never guaranteed. In fact, its demise was widely predicted. Before the revolutionary iPod, before the world-changing iPhone, and long before the iPad created an entirely new category of computing, there was a period of darkness, a decade of wandering in the wilderness. This was a time when the Apple logo was not a symbol of cool, but a mark of irrelevance. The year is 1985. On the surface, Apple Computer is a phenomenon, a symbol of the personal computing revolution it helped ignite. It had dared to challenge the dominance of IBM, the corporate behemoth. It was the pirates, not the Navy, the rebels against the empire. But beneath that veneer, a deep and bitter conflict was brewing, a battle for the very soul of the company. A power struggle centered around its co-founder, brilliant, volatile, and visionary, Steve Jobs. The conflict reached its boiling point in the spring of 1985. The Macintosh, Jobs' masterpiece, was failing to meet its ambitious sales forecasts. The company's stock was faltering. Pressure from the board was mounting on John Sculley to take decisive action. Sculley, feeling his own position threatened, decided it was time to rein in the company's co-founder. He devised a plan to strip Jobs of all his operational responsibilities, effectively sidelining him. He intended to remove Jobs from his role as head of the Macintosh division. He intended to relegate him to a figurehead position as chairman. He intended to give him no direct reports. He intended to give him no real power. It was a corporate neutering, designed to contain the man he could no longer control. The board meeting on May 24, 1985, was the final act of the tragedy. The air was thick with tension and a profound sense of sorrow. This wasn't just business. It felt like a family tearing itself apart. John Sculley presented his case methodically. The choice was simple: either he went or Jobs went. Jobs, in turn, made his own desperate plea. He argued for his vision, for the soul of the company he had built from nothing. But his words fell on deaf ears. They had already made up their minds. They chose stability over genius, predictability over passion. The decision was made. The board voted unanimously to support Sculley's reorganization plan. Steve Jobs was to be stripped of all his managerial duties. He would retain the title of chairman, but it was a hollow crown, a title without a kingdom. For a man like Jobs, this was a fate worse than being fired. It was a public humiliation. Stunned and defeated, Jobs left the boardroom. He had lost. He had lost his company, his life's work, to the man he had brought in to help him run it. The man he had famously recruited by asking, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?" In his own words, the feeling was devastating. He described it as being, gut-punched. He felt the weight of public failure pressing down on him. The focus of his life had been taken away. The prodigal son had been officially cast out. He was 30 years old, and in the eyes of the world, he was a archival headline: Jobs stripped of duties at Apple. In the days and weeks that followed, Steve Jobs was a man adrift. The company he had co-founded in his parents' garage, the place that was the very center of his universe, had publicly and painfully cast him out. He would come to the office, his chairman title a cruel joke, and find he had nothing to do. His calendar was empty, his phone silent. He was a ghost, haunting the halls of his own creation. The vibrant energy that once surrounded him had been replaced by awkward silence and averted gazes. The sense of betrayal was immense. It was compounded by a profound feeling of emptiness. What do you do when the thing you love most is taken from you? In the short term, there was a sense of calm at Apple. The constant internal battles ceased. But the cost of the stability was the loss of the company's heart. Without Jobs' relentless push for innovation, his obsessive focus on the user experience, mediocrity began to set in. In September 1985, Steve Jobs officially resigned from Apple. He sold all but a single share of his stock. He kept one so he could continue to receive the annual reports, a small, defiant tether to the company he still loved. He took a handful of loyal Apple employees with him. He set out to start a new company, Next. But stepping into that unknown future, he entered his darkest, most challenging chapter. The fall was over, but the wilderness years had just begun. His ego was bruised, but his ambition was very much alive. Fueled by anger, fueled by a burning desire for vindication, he founded Next, Inc. He wanted not to compete, but to leapfrog Apple, to show them exactly what they had lost. It was to be his magnum opus, a perfect black cube of computational brilliance, designed for the world of higher education and research. The culture at Next was an even more extreme version of the Macintosh division. Jobs demanded absolute perfection, from the internal layout of the circuit boards to the precise shade of black on the magnesium case. This drove the price far beyond what universities could afford. It was a beautiful, powerful machine almost no one could buy. Sales were abysmal. The company burned through hundreds of millions and was hemorrhaging cash. The failure was slow, painful, and deeply humbling. The world was watching, and once again, it seemed Steve Jobs had failed. Section 2. The Pixar Gamble. Art meets financial peril. In 1986, Jobs purchased a small computer graphics division from Lucasfilm for $5 million, investing another $5 million into the new venture. He renamed it Pixar. Initially, Jobs wasn't interested in the movie business. He saw potential in high-end imaging hardware for medical and government clients. But, like the Next Cube, the image computer was expensive with a tiny market. The company sold only a few hundred units. It was another brilliant product without a viable business model. To keep the lights on, Pixar's small animation department, led by John Lasseter, began producing short films to showcase the hardware's capabilities. The shorts, like Luxo Jr., were artistically groundbreaking, earning critical acclaim and even an Oscar nomination. But they didn't make money. For years, Pixar was a financial black hole. He reportedly invested over $50 million of his own fortune to keep Pixar alive, $1 million at a time. Jobs, the hardware visionary, was reluctantly forced to confront a new reality. The true magic of Pixar wasn't in its machines, it was in storytelling. Section 3. The Weight of Failure. These were the wilderness years for Steve Jobs. Two companies, Next and Pixar, both teetering on the brink of collapse. He was no longer the golden boy of Silicon Valley. He was seen as a one-hit wonder whose genius had been a fluke. The financial pressure was immense. Every month he signed personal checks to cover payroll, watching his personal fortune dwindle. This was not just a business problem, it was a deep personal crisis. Had he lost his touch? Was he destined to be a footnote in the history of the company he created? He was known for his intense, often brutal management style. But now that intensity was amplified by desperation. It was a series of small defeats that, taken together, painted a picture of a man lost in the desert, with no oasis in sight. But it is in this precise environment of sustained public failure that the seeds of his future success were being sown. Failure was not just breaking him down, it was, unbeknownst to him, reshaping him into the leader he needed to become. He was learning humility, patience, and the crucial difference between a beautiful product and a viable business. What looked like a decade of unmitigated failure was really intense, invaluable preparation. Every setback, every miscalculation, every dollar burned was a lesson in disguise. At Next, Jobs and his team were building one of the world's most advanced operating systems. Next step was revolutionary, stable, powerful, years ahead of Windows and the aging Mac OS. Jobs didn't know it yet, but he was forging the software heart that would resurrect Apple. Meanwhile, his painful journey with Pixar was teaching him the art of storytelling. Creating a compelling story wasn't solitary, it was messy, collaborative, iterative. He saw how a simple story about a desk lamp and its child could out-evoke advanced hardware. This education reshaped what a product could be. The same principles that made a great film could make a great product. When he returned, he sold the story of Think Different. He didn't sell a music player. He sold 1,000 songs in your pocket. The wilderness years turned the hardware geek into a master storyteller. He had to accept the hardware was a failure. In 1993, he made the gut-wrenching decision to shut down Next's hardware division. He had to negotiate a multi-picture deal with Disney. It was a humiliating deal. Yet, he swallowed his pride and signed it. He was learning to play the long game, to accept a short-term loss for a long-term strategic victory. This period was a crucible that burned away youthful arrogance and replaced it with hardened, strategic resolve. He was, as he would later say, connecting the dots. The failure, the struggle, and the hidden preparation were not a detour from his destiny. They were the path to it. While Steve Jobs was being forged in the fires of his own failures, the kingdom he had left behind was slowly, and then very quickly, falling into ruin. The departure of Jobs had left a vacuum of vision at the company's core. In the decade that followed, a series of leaders failed to fill it. Focus on a few insanely great products gave way to market segmentation, a sprawling portfolio with overlapping features and nonsensical naming conventions. The atmosphere inside the Cupertino campus was one of despair. Morale was at an all-time low. Employees felt like they were rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The company had lost its identity. By 1997, the company was in a freefall. The numbers told a terrifying story. At one point, the company was just 90 days away from bankruptcy. This wasn't a metaphor, it was a literal accounting reality. Desperate, short-sighted decisions followed. Massive layoffs. Entire R&D projects were axed. The world began to write Apple's obituary. Michael Dell was asked what he'd do. His answer: shut it down and return money to shareholders. The company's last best hope, codenamed Copland, was supposed to be the savior. In 1996, Apple officially canceled it. This was the state of Apple in late 1996, financially bankrupt, strategically incoherent, spiritually broken. It was out of ideas and out of time. Gil Amelio realized radical surgery was the only option. Apple could not build its way out. It had to buy its way out. The primary candidate, BOS, created by Jean-Louis Gasset. A deal with BOS seemed imminent. Then, another option surfaced. The other option, Next. The company founded by Steve Jobs. Gil Amelio reached out to Jobs. Jobs arrived at Apple and gave a masterful performance. In December 1996, Apple announced it would acquire Next for $429 million. Officially, a world-class operating system. Unofficially, a rescue mission. Apple wasn't just buying Next, it was buying back Steve Jobs. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in early 1997, he did not come back as a conqueror, at least not at first. He spent his first few weeks and months observing, listening, and taking the measure of the company, dropping into labs and design studios unannounced, asking pointed questions, quietly assessing who was talented and who was part of the problem. The atmosphere was electric with tension. Employees were terrified and thrilled. By the summer of 1997, the board had seen enough. In a swift boardroom coup, Jobs orchestrated Amelio's ouster. The board appointed Steve Jobs as interim CEO, ICO. The interim title was a formality. The king was back on the throne. He launched a ruthless purge of Apple's bloated product line. The company's core problem was a complete lack of focus.
Which are the good ones? Why should we be selling this?
He personally killed project after project. He shut down the Newton. He ended the licensing experiment for Mac OS. In weeks, he cut roughly 350 items down to about 10. The decision to cut over 70% of Apple's products was met with a storm of internal resistance and external criticism.
Focusing is about saying no.
The chaos of 350 products was replaced by a strategy so simple it could be drawn on a 2x2 grid. This 4-box grid was an act of pure genius. It was the ultimate expression of focus. The first product to emerge from this new philosophy was the one in the consumer desktop box. This would become the iMac. The other 3 boxes would soon be filled. Each product was a leader in its class, designed with a clear purpose and a distinct identity. This simple, elegant, powerful constraint unleashed a torrent of creativity and innovation, setting the stage for the company's dramatic comeback. Jobs made his third and perhaps most shocking alpha decision. He picked up the phone and called Bill Gates. At Macworld Expo 1997 in Boston, Jobs made the stunning announcement. Microsoft would invest $150 million in Apple. He announced the 5-year commitment for Office. The crowd was stunned. Some cheered, many booed. For Apple faithful, it was heresy.
We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose.
This pragmatic decision stabilized Apple like almost nothing else. Ego destroys businesses, strategy builds them. These three alpha decisions created a powerful ripple effect, transforming Apple from a company on the brink of death to one poised for an extraordinary revival. The first tangible result was the iMac. It became the fastest-selling computer in Apple's history, and, more importantly, made Apple cool again. The iMac's success was the first domino in a series of masterstrokes. The iPod, the iPhone, the iPad. He didn't save Apple with one miracle product. He performed painful, necessary surgery first. The comeback was not a single leap, but a series of deliberate, strategic steps starting in 1997. The story of Apple's fall and resurrection is more than a chapter in a business textbook. It is a modern epic, the rebirth of a culture, driven by the conviction of its once exiled founder. The journey from 90 days from bankruptcy to the most valuable company was not a miracle. It demonstrated a timeless principle. In crisis, clarity is your weapon. Focus is your engine. The question is not what Steve Jobs did. The question is, what decision are you avoiding? In your own life, in your own work, in your own company? We all have our own version of Apple in 1997. The path to our own revival follows the same logic that saved Apple. It begins with the courage to say no. The most important decision is rarely the one that adds something new. It is the one that removes a distraction, clarifies a purpose, and finally, sets you free to build what you were meant to build. And maybe the most important decision is the one you're about to make. Subscribe to Alpha Decisions for more videos on the powerful decisions that built millionaires and changed the world.